$0.8 billion after-tax loss it expects to realize on the sale, and also partly to support its credit rating. We now know, courtesy of CNBC reporting, that this equity raise failed and that the bank is instead trying to sell itself off to a bigger bank. Which again, people on the hopium, because nobody in their right mind would buy their fuck up. Why did Silicon Valley Bank do this? Well, according to Morgan Stanley, shitholder, who as of yesterday was the only sell-side analyst to have a sell rating on the company, a 190 price target. Yeah, because I'm sure they were customers of all the other banks who were, not going to tell people to tank their stock. The bank did not intend to spark a panic, but instead these actions enhance its balance sheet flexibility, which again is more a crock of shit because you fucking fucked up the most plain vanilla of vanilla fucking trades as rates move higher. By selling down its existing AFS portfolio, which had a duration of 3.6 years, and reinvesting the proceeds in short-term treasuries, toiletries, Silicon Valley Bank is enhancing its liquidity position, and no, it's not. As rates continue to rise, the bank is also terming out its funding by adding $115 billion on longer-dated borrowings and hedging to protect against further increases in rates. All in, the bank estimates that it'll flip to assets with each 25 basis point increase in rates driving 50 to 60 mil higher net. Yeah, I don't think so. English, the bank had a lot of fixed rate treasury and other exposure that was underwater because it went the wrong way, and carrying an unrealized loss, and having concluded rates that will keep rising, they decided to restructure its assets, where I'm sure they got hosed, and flip its portfolio to a fixed rate one. So I'm pretty sure they got hosed on swaps too, where rate hikes cause even more capital losses. The short-term one where they did, modest gains. Of course, the transition ended up costing them billions. None of this is shocking, and yet the market was clearly surprised. Why? See, for the answer, we have to go all the way back to the immediate aftermath of the last financial crisis, when, and then it goes into accounting stuff, when in early 2009, U.S. regulators suspended mark-to-market. Instead of having banks hold debt securities on their books at price, they allowed them to split their asset holdings into two components available for sale, which would be mark-to-market, which could be sold to short up liquidity, and held to maturity bucket, which allowed the banks to keep debt securities at cost. Which again, in a fucking environment of rising rates and mega inflation, held to maturity is a fucking retarded concept. Because if you held even a 5-year toiletry or a 10-year toiletry, it'll be garbage. Because not only do you have rates rising, you have the dollar in which it is denominated being absolutely fucking worthless at a much higher rate than rates rising. And then you also have the de-dollarization, wherein that'll cause other liquidity problems in those future time periods. Because, for example, suppose it's now the yuan bond, yuan gold bond, whatever the fuck they come up with, or whatever they come up with, people are going to be putting their money in debt, and now you got some sort of fucking liquidity premium for your shit toiletries. So that entire fucking concept is fucking retarded. This was created to avoid cross-selling conditions. If one bank was forced to liquidate security, and I laugh at that because I guarantee you Goldman made a shitload of money fucking liquidating their garbage there. I'm sure they got hosed, whatever fucking goddamn prime dealer they're dealing with, they got fucking hosed. In effect, other holders of the same security. Well, when they got so much fucking inventory, it doesn't really matter for them. But in other words, it was purely an idiosyncratic feature, not one that was meant to offset macro conditions. Which again, macro conditions say that entire concept is completely fucking retarded. And understandably so, in a time of raging deflation, the ZIRP, it's not really ZIRP, it's NIRP with the negative interest rate policy, and QE, which pretty sure those money printers are turning back on, when rates would seemingly never go up. Virtually nobody even considered a scenario when it would be the Fed itself that would force rates higher to fight galloping inflation. Or mega inflation, as I call it. Sadly for SIVB, that's where we are now. And the Fed rates, I don't know, I mean, just the fucking ticker name that these fuckers picked out. Why would you pick SIV? Why would you do that? You know, you're a shit fucking commercial bank. Why would you? But anyway, the Fed's rate hikes have manifested in two ways. First, and this is where it gets good too. Back to what I was saying. So you have but one domino to fall. Where there's a shitload more dominoes. Not just in this country, but the entire fucking world. Especially in the shit third world, where they're all gonna fall. That's where it gets fucking entertaining. Again, that would probably be a video of several fucking hours. But let's go on with the SIVB over here. So first, rising rates would afford depositors a completely risk-free of parking your money at treasuries without taking on company-specific deposit risk. That's if your company's not run by a bunch of dipshits, which clearly these shit fucks were. So, the deposit risk was there. And I don't think it was fraud, not like an FTX. It wasn't outright fraud. It was pure and utter dipshit. Because they managed to fuck up the most plain vanilla of vanilla trades, the US toiletries. So, and again, I laugh at that too. It's because US toiletries, at one point, may have been risk-free. That is not the case today. That is absolutely not the case today. Where now today, if you hold a US toiletry, it's garbage. Shit, it's worth less than toilet paper. You're either going to have it defaulted on, which the US has done several times throughout its history, and that was when the US was a wealthy country and not the broke as shit debtor nation in the history of the world. Also stupid enough to start a fucking war with the countries that lend it trillions of dollars and make all their products. So you're not in the situation of, when Nixon closed the gold window or the shit in the 1800s. You're in today, where they're even dumber and more fucked. So, thinking of it as risk-free is a complete and utter delusion and derangement. This is why I call it toiletries. And then back to the SIVB garbage stuff. This is a big issue for SIVB because, as noted above, it has $170 billion in deposits. Second, rising rates force the bank to sweep ever bigger losses on its debt assets under the rug. Again, if the bank weren't run by dipshits, you might have been fine. Well, probably not, but you wouldn't be as bad off as what happened to them where it collapses, it fails. But yes, the rates make their fuck up even worse. And yes, while the bank can hide behind the held at cost basis afforded by held to maturity, the fact that the bank's held to cost basis, or what's that, HTP? What's HTP? I don't know what the fuck that is. Probably a shit bucket. Book was of relatively moderate duration meant that even if it was held to maturity, it would still suffer losses, which is guaranteed if you hold any of these toiletries to maturity. The whole concept is fucking retarded at this point. which is why it proceeded with the previously discussed balance sheet restructuring. The funny part, of course, is that we knew all of this. Well, yeah. They probably just thought everything would be alright. So, yes, both SEC and Bail-in Administration Corporation regulators require banks to disclose not only the value of their held-to-market assets, or was it? Yeah, or held-to-maturity, I mean, what am I doing? But also the fair value of said assets, with the fair value being, as the name implies, the value of the HTM assets if they were to be sold today. Which again, you also would have seen, because if they were fucking sold today, prime dealers like Goldman or JPMC or whatever other shit fucks are out there would have hosed them on it. Because they could. The delta between the two is what's known as the net unrealized loss, and it is rapidly emerging as the most important indicator of bank health. To be sure, until recently, nobody cared about the net unrealized losses on bank portfolios because, well, there simply weren't any. Once the rate hike started and debt prices for anything from treasuries, toiletries, to mortgage-backed securities, commercial real estate started to tumble. Oh, don't even get me started on commercial real estate. So now that everybody went to the work-at-home model because of COVID, and nobody wants to go back to work because working from home is fucking awesome, commercial real estate is now garbage. Shit, absolute shit. Nobody's ever gonna fucking use that shit again. Started to tumble, well, not to mention, people are dropping dead from the coincidences. The unrealized losses started to climb, and nowhere is this more visible than in Silicon Valley Bank's own balance sheet, where from virtually no losses a year ago, the number climbed to $16 billion as of the third quarter. Yeah, that again is just from the nominal value of that crap and not the real value of it, which is, again, I call it toiletries. Now, this is a problem because at the same time as total shareholder equity was $15.8 billion. This means that quietly all of the bank's book equity had been wiped out simply by the accumulated, but not marked losses on SIVB's, the maturity portfolio. It's not the worst thing, but still. So, in some ways, SIVB was unique. While all U.S. banks parked a chunk of their money in treasuries and other bonds that dropped in value last year, SIVB took it to a different level. Its investment portfolio swelled to 57% of its total assets. No other competitor among 74 major U.S. banks had more than 42. And here lies the rub. If it was only SIVB that has an unrealized loss problem, then there would be no contagion, and the rest of the banking sector would be safe and sound. Unfortunately, as explained, the reason why SIVB's held-to-maturity book, or held-to-market, blew up, what is that again? Held-to-maturity, blew up is because of surging rage, which will surge further, which is also why SIVB proceeded to liquidate its available-for-sale securities. At $26 billion, these are far less than the $91.3 billion in the held-to-maturity book. It's also why every other bank is now suffering under the pressure of massive net unrealized losses. Which brings up the next question. If net unrealized losses, yeah, it's massive for Bank of America. Because, what's the scale here? It's in that's a couple $100 billion or something. Yeah. JPMC, Citi, Wells Fargo. Yeah. Which brings up the next question. Where are you going to go? For the depositors, where are you going to put your cash? Like blockchain, right? But just like SIVB, the unrealized loss issue, emerged only in 2022 when rates exploded and the prices of debt securities tumbled. What stands out here is that while other banks have substantial exposure. Oh, and that gets fun too. Because those banks, the people who work there, generally aren't fucking retarded. So even if they did incur these, unrealized losses yet, it usually would have been hedged. But the fun part is because they hedged it amongst each other. So now counterparty risk says that they're fucked. Which again, I'm speculating, but I'm pretty sure that would be the case. And it is absolutely fucking laughable. Zero didn't put that in, but I'm sure he was aware of that too. So when they had some unrealized loss, but they entered into some sort of other fucking goddamn derivative, swap, whatever, to hedge it, another bank has to pay for their fucking loss. So in a way, even if they were fucking hedged, if they just, swapped with each other, they still all end up fucking losing. Point being, somebody's paying for these fucking losses. And even if it was somebody else, say it was another fucking bank from another country, well, they're the counterparty that's fucked, and they go under. Just like SVB, the unrealized losses issue emerged only in 22 and rates exploded, prices of debt securities tumbled. What stands out here is that while all banks, and again, these are the plain vanilla shit, so yes, you're almost ultimately fucking assured that's what happened. Because somebody's not going to fail to write some fucking goddamn swap, some derivative for plain vanilla toiletries. Nobody's going to say no to that. What stands out here is that while all banks have substantial exposure, the total is $250 billion as of December 31st of last quarter. Bank of America has the most exposure at just under $110 billion. So again, as I was saying, even if Bank of America doesn't drop for that reason, and it probably will because it has those fucking shit ABS garbage and other things, the counterparty to their hedge, they're going to drop. And it's a shitload of money. And another problem, these amounts may not sound like a lot, but when expressed in terms of book shareholder value for any given bank, they are staggering. The next chart shows what the net unrealized losses is when expressed as a function of total equity. Now again, these are just fucking stuff that's unrealized. It's just still in the books. You could always hold it to maturity. Not in a fucking inflationary environment where you were stupid enough to fucking start a war with the people who fucking loan you trillions of dollars and make all your shit. So, you're kind of fucked for your own stupidity. When they tell you to stay the fuck out of Taiwan, you probably should have stayed the fuck out of Taiwan. Oh, and brought the Rolls Royce, by the way. Fucking idiots. And another problem, these amounts may not sound like a lot, but when expressed in terms of book shareholder value for any given bank, they're staggering. The next chart shows what the net unrealized losses is when expressed as a function of total equity. Yes, SIVB is by far the worst, with all of its book value wiped out by the unrealized loss. Wow. So I guess we should take a look at the backgrounds of those dipshits. But other banks are hardly doing much better. To wit, Bank of America's unrealized loss, i.e. the market value gap between its held-to-book and fair value, represents 43% of combined total equity. At State Street, it is 27%, Wells is 25%, U.S. Bank is 24%, and so on. Look at this little chart here. Oh yeah, look at that.